Screenagers, we're back yet again. Another episode of the Canon, your favorite movie podcast, the one and only movie podcast, as always, providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. My name is Raf, and we have another amazing essential movie lined up for y'all today. We're going to be talking All Quiet on the Western Front, the 1930 version. We were going to have Sailor Monsoon on, but unfortunately he has been dealing with ongoing technical issues, so he couldn't join us. But in his place, he's become our go-to relief pitcher whenever we need someone to jump on uh, last minute in an emergency to help us out. Jacob Holmes, he's back, one of our favorite Saw contributors. But it's been a minute. How have you been, dude?
I'm doing good. Replacement troops for uh for the battle just have to keep on. That's how it is. Just one person picks up where the last one left off.
You picked up Sailor's boots, and hopefully you don't experience the same fate that he did. But if All Quiet on the Western Front tells us anything, it's that we're all doomed for for that same fate, unfortunately. um, all right, before we get into the movie, I feel like there are a couple of things that we do want to bring up or quickly chat through. The first one, listeners, you may or may not be able to hear it, but I'm playing hurt today. I'm a little under the weather. Um, but we're here. We got to show up and pump out these episodes. Otherwise, uh, Duke will have our heads. Um, so Jacob, I was thinking, I was slamming some Emergen-C before. Is that something that you keep in the kitchen or in your bathroom? Because I feel like it could go in either place, and I don't know where I personally want to keep it. So I'm curious as to where you would keep it in your home.
In my home, I would keep it in the kitchen, not because it's even necessarily because it's emergency. I don't keep emergency in my home. Typically, I mean, I go pick it up when I'm sick, but I would once I pick it up and I have some left over, it would go in a tall, skinny cabinet in my kitchen where I have deemed to put the medicine. I don't really have a lot of places to put medicine type stuff in my bathrooms, so and also it's just like
Interesting.
I don't know, for some reason the bathroom for me is like I don't want to keep my medicine. I mean, I know people used to put it behind their mirrors. They had that door that
Yeah,
opens up, and we do have that, but there's like no shelves in it right now, and so it's like, you know,
I've never heard of medicine in the kitchen, um, but it kind of feels like a kitchen thing because you're like mixing it with water and it's like a drink. But then it also feels like medicine. But if you keep your medicine in the kitchen already, then it makes sense to keep the Emergen-C in there.
I've never really even thought that much about. Well, it depends on how much room you have in your bathroom, I guess. But it's not like it really. When you think about it, it doesn't make that much sense to take any medicine like in the bathroom. Like why, like cough syrup
Yeah.
in the bathroom or take a pill. If you're taking a pill, you're gonna need a drink. So unless you have like cups for your water from your bathroom sink, I mean, why wouldn't you have it in your kitchen? Honestly, you know. But
These are all good points. These are very fair points.
on the other hand, if your house comes with bathroom storage, you probably don't have a lot of stuff to store in your bathroom other than, towels, toiletries, and medicine versus, your kitchen storage space is kind of valued for all the kitchen items you need. So it's really just functional.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get some thoughts in the comments of where people keep Emergen-C and just like medicine more generally. Um, the other super random question that I had for you before we jump in to the movie, um, there was news recently that big news for me, I think, that Bojangles is coming to Brooklyn. Are you a Bojangles guy, or are you more of like a Zaxby's person? Do you have both where you are? What's your stance on Bojangles?
Well, we do now have a Bojangles in Prattville, which took over the old Milo's building, which took over the old Steak and Shake building, next to the movie theater. Um, so this is the first Bojangles we've had. I've not been to Bojangles. I I have been to a Bojangles once on a trip before Bojangles came to Prattville, and it was good. I associate Bojangles with pancakes. Um,
Interesting.
that's what I thought they're known for, more so than anything, and, we've had Zaxby's for a long time, and I love Zaxby's. Um, not only is the food at Zaxby's pretty good, the service at our Zaxby's has always been really good. It's like a non-Christian Chick-fil-A, um, and it's open on
Open on
Sundays,
Sundays.
so,
Yeah.
never disappoints. So, yeah, Zaxby's easily clears Bojangles for me, but that's partly because I just we never had Bojangles here.
Interesting. I don't know. I think I've only been to Zaxby's once, but I love Bojangles. And for the longest time, I was advocating for the need for a Bojangles north of the Mason-Dixon, which we just like didn't have. I think there might be one in one of the DC airports, and that's about it. And I think this Brooklyn one will be the first Bojangles that is like properly in the north. So again, for me, it feels like big news. I don't think that there are any Zaxby's up here. But either way,
Honestly
I've always been more of a Bojangles guy.
honestly, down here, I would feel like Bojangles feels more comparable to Popeyes maybe, like a
Okay.
Popeyes kitchen, and we've had a
Yeah.
Popeyes longer, and I like Popeyes chicken a lot. I mean, Popeyes is very good, however, the service is not always great, and it's really slow, so we don't tend to go to Popeyes a lot. I deliver DoorDashes, and anytime I get a DoorDash delivery for Popeyes after, like, 8:30 PM, it's
Hmm.
hell. Like, they're always extra slow, and they, like, don't have half
Yeah.
the stuff the person ordered, and it's like it kinda turns me off from going there.
Yeah. I am a fan of Popeyes. I feel like we've had Popeyes up here for a while. It was kind of a big deal when like the first Chick-fil-A came to New York, but now they're everywhere. They're probably like 8 in New York City. They're all around. Um, if I were to rank all of them, I feel like I feel like once I have Bojangles like easily accessible to me, it will sort of lose whatever like aura it has in my mind. Like I think part of the reason why I love Bojangles so much is because I never get it. So like whenever I do go south and I see a Bojangles, I'm like, oh my God, I have to get Bojangles because I can never get it back home. Whereas like I don't feel that way about Chick-fil-A and Popeyes now. But I think once Bojangles is here, I'll just sort of it'll make me reconsider my rankings of like southern fast food chicken joints.
Sure.
And
Did
like
you
Chick-fil-A might end up being number one because I do love Chick-fil-A. Their
their
breakfast
sandwiches
sandwiches are delicious.
are great. We had a transplant in my newsroom from Seattle who was like, "I don't really get the Chick-fil-A sandwich, like, why it's so good," but she turns out she was having the grilled chicken sandwich, and
Oh,
her name was Siri, like the phone, and I was like, "Siri, it's because you eating the grilled chicken sandwich, it's not what they're known for." It's the
that's
first
the
time.
most that's the most Seattle thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen Vengeance? BJ Novak?
uh yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Whataburger was definitely one of those that was like that for us because, we would go down to Florida a lot where Whataburgers were, but, the nearest
Mhm.
Whataburger to us in Alabama was a little ways away, so but now we have a Whataburger in Prattville, and we don't
Mhm.
it loses some of the specialness when the mystique when it's too close to home, for sure.
Yeah.
Even though in Vengeance, the whole greatness about Whataburger is it's right there.
Yeah. But it either has to be something that like you have all the time and you've had like your entire life and that's why it's special. It's like partly a nostalgia thing, or it's in an area where you don't live. So then whenever you do go to that area, it becomes something that's special. Like
I
for
would say
me,
this too. That's true. That's true. This is technically kind of unrelated, but you probably don't deal with this because you are in the NYC area. But I will say for Whataburger, one thing that is still special about it is, and it's kind of at the wrong time of my life because I don't work like at night or late as usual. But
mhm,
we do not have a lot of 24-hour options here anymore. It used to be like at least McDonald's was 24 hours. Of course, Walmart.
yeah,
Like, Walmart used to be open 24 hours, and now it's like if you want something to eat after 2 a.m., it's like it was just Waffle House, and now Whataburger provides at least a second option. So you know that's nice.
yeah. That is big. That's a big thing. Um, that like yeah, I rarely think about that. um, because everything is open at 2 a.m. in New York for the most part. Even on yeah, after like if you like work late, you can you know grab 2 a.m. Chinese food or whatever, or or
Right.
any other fast food joint. Yeah. Um, yeah, I was just gonna say like going back to not having something like readily available. Like I love In and Out whenever I go to California, but I feel like if I had it all the time, like it wouldn't feel as special. So I mean, we could sit here and talk about different fast food joints all day. Do you guys have Shake Shack down there?
Nope, no Shake Shack, no In and Out, and I'm not as well traveled as you, so I've never had an In and Out. Because I've
But
never
have you
been.
had Shake Shack?
Never, I don't think I've had Shake Shack. I could have. I may have, but if I
Yeah.
did, I don't particularly remember. We had Steak and Shake, um, Jack's. Jack's is like a southern kind of thing,
Mm,
maybe. We have a
yeah.
Chick-fil-A offshoot called Goldfingers, um, that's trying to creep out,
Nice.
but it's not really big yet, you know. So
Yeah. I feel like Shake Shack is expanding more than In and Out. So you might get a Shake Shack soon, which would be great. Um, and Shake Shack also has really good breakfast sandwiches, but they don't serve them at all Shake Shack locations, only at it's very limited scope. Um, you can probably tell I love breakfast sandwiches. The Bojangles like chicken biscuit breakfast sandwich with like the massive lemonade is so good. And I truly cannot wait to be able to get that locally. I don't know where in Brooklyn it's going to be, if it's like going to be close to me or if it's going to be a ways away, but bet your ass I will be at that Bojangles once it's open, and I will be getting myself some chicken, some biscuits, some lemonade, all that jazz. And then maybe sitting down and watching an essential movie.
you're breaking my imagination of New York City, where you just obviously you get all your breakfast sandwiches from the bodega on the corner, and you would never go anywhere else.
S- I mean, obviously, the bodega bacon, egg, and cheese is the most reliable sandwich, the most reliable thing that you can, possibly think of. I will say for Chick-fil-A specifically, their breakfast sandwiches. So I usually get like a bacon, egg, and cheese or a chicken, egg, and cheese on a biscuit and then add bacon. Um, those are great for like hangovers. Unfortunately, because Chick-fil-A isn't open on Sundays and Sunday morning is like typically the day that I'm most likely to be a little hungover and like in need of a Chick-fil-A sandwich, it's very unfortunate that they're not open that day. Um, but yeah, I mean, like 9 times out of 10, you're getting a bacon, egg, and cheese from your local bodega. But like the Chick-fil-A sandwich is just like it's like a nice little treat every now and then.
I think Chick-fil-A will be very happy to know their sandwiches are not being provided to you on your hangover your hangover
Yeah.
breakfast. On Sunday
It's
morning.
it's always the most upsetting thing, like Sunday morning had a couple drinks on Saturday night. All I want is a greasy breakfast sandwich from Chick-fil-A, and they're not open. Um, but that's okay. Uh, probably way more fast food breakfast talk um, than people thought we were going to be getting out of a all quiet on the Western Front conversation. But we never know where things are going to lead us. Um, you know, in this show before we actually get to the movie that we're here to talk about. So we do have, we're gonna have to chat about All Quiet on the Western Front and everything that makes it essential. Um, but before we get to that, I know I've already said that. Uh, instead of waiting for after our discussion about the movie, um, I figured we could, chat about it a little bit on the front end. But there's some exciting stuff happening at Screen Age Wasteland. Um, Still a lot of it involving you, Jacob. So why don't you tell the folks a little bit about what it is that you're doing with pole position leading into Oscar race season?
Yeah, obviously we are in the thick of the Oscar race right now, really getting started for the most part for most people. And so we have weekly pole position articles going out on the website. I think we've been doing that for 4 or 5 weeks now. And I have also been filming a pole position podcast that has not come out yet, but will be out weekly. I've already recorded 4 episodes, two of them with, of course, you yourself, Raph, and Brian Loomis, and two with Valerie Morial and Ramona Comet, to talk about break down categories: best actor, best actress, supporting actress, kind of 30 to 40 minute conversations about the categories. And it's been a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to continuing that up to the nominations in January. So, yeah, pole position is in full swing. If you are interested in the Oscars, if you're not really sure of the state of the race, watch the YouTube page and check that out. The only problem we're having is a little bit of technical difficulties on my end processing the videos. So, this is my first time actually doing the production side, and I don't know if it's me or my computer or what, but we will overcome that and hopefully get those out for you starting Monday. Monday after this comes out, I think. So
Sweet. Yeah, looking forward to those. I guess Sailor's tech bug did bite you a little bit, but we'll get those resolved soon, and those some of those first episodes might already be out by the time this episode is out, or will be coming out shortly after this is released. So, um, yeah, folks should definitely be on the lookout for that and the written version of Pole Position. Things are heating up in the Oscar race. How did you fall into being the Screen Age Wasteland Oscar prognosticator?
well, I guess I decided that I wanted to do it. I like following the Oscar race pretty pretty well. It's really more of just like my obsession with trying to predict things and like and follow and
Yeah,
list things. And the Oscars just provides like it's my fantasy football basically. Um, and I
yeah,
said I told a few people I'm probably gonna make like a couple of put my money where my mouth is next week on a couple of bets. On like some of the odds I don't feel like are caught up right now on some of those races. Um, not a lot of money,
yeah.
not a lot of money to put down, but it'll be fun to see how that works out. Yeah, but no, I just told Duke, hey, I want to do this series called Pole Position. Hopefully, people are getting what that means. It's like pole position, like NASCAR race, but it's POLL because Oscar poles. Anyway,
Yeah,
um, so, so that's how I became chief Oscar pundit for Screen Age Wasteland. I made
I
that
love
I
it.
I made that title myself, which the acronym is COP. So I don't know how
Nice.
that.
Yeah, I'm well, so you were talking about maybe placing some bets on some of the races, and I don't know if this made it into one of the videos that we did with Brian Loomis, but he was saying, you know, that it might be a little bit of foul play if you are placing bets as a Oscars prognosticator who has a lot of sway in how the race ends up playing out. If you say that XYZ person is in the lead and everyone is, watching your pole position videos and then they're voting according to that, to what you're saying, but then you're making money off of everyone voting that way based on what you said. What happens then? Are we falling into an NBA game fixing kind of scandal,
Look,
or
look,
something like that? Well,
the way I see it,
are you afraid of that?
as long as I don't contact any Oscars voters and they don't contact me, then I can't help if I influence them. I don't know. As far as I know, you know, I can't help it if I help them find the right movies, you know. You know what I'm saying?
This would be like if we learned that Wolf Blitzer was also like a strategist for a major, like, politician or something. Would it
I mean,
not? Is
is
that
it wrong to is it it's not like it'd be wrong if I paid the Oscar voters to vote my way, but is it
Yeah,
wrong if I just, like, argue my way into it and say, "Look, this is what you should do."
I
I
think
don't see a
so.
problem
I
with
think
that.
that's
That seems fair.
it's a form of insider trading of some sort. I don't know. Well, hopefully you don't get in trouble. Um, hopefully, big Oscar isn't coming after you. And hopefully you do win some money off those bets. Uh, so very fun stuff happening there. Speaking of the Oscars, a movie that performed very, very, very well at the Academy Awards. I think this was the first movie to ever win both Best Picture and Best Director. All Quiet on the Western Front. How's that for a little transition?
Yeah, that's
Um,
a good way to do it.
Great movie. Um, a movie that I hadn't seen until prepping for this episode. I believe that's the same case for you. Is that
That's
right?
correct. And were you in the same
So
boat as I was, having seen another version of the film?
yeah, I had only ever seen the Edward Berger version. And I had been meaning to watch this version after seeing that. And you know what? I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, but for the longest time, I thought that this version was also a German made film. Um, but like knowing that it like did so well at the Oscars, I should have known that it was an American production and that they weren't rewarding a German made film about a German book. And it wasn't until I like watched a trailer for this like a week or two ago that I realized, oh, this is an American movie with like very American actors. Which I do think is interesting for like how this movie ends up playing out, which I think we'll talk about a little bit. But what were sort of like your initial reactions to watching this?
So, at the very beginning of turning this on, honestly, I turned it on a little bit late at night, and it was a little bit, I don't I struggle a little bit with some of these films from this early on. It
Hmm.
didn't really capture my attention the same way, especially as the 2022 film, regardless of your ultimate thoughts on it. I think the introduction to that film is really beautiful and arresting in particular. And this one picks up where the 2022 film takes a few minutes, but it's basically the same start eventually. But it has to start out kind of and then naturally in that like rah rah, like let's go to war and everything's cool, and it kind of feels dated a little bit. Um, so it was a little hard to get into at first, but I think once they go to war, it really picks up, and you get some of that. I think that's where it differentiates itself a little bit in terms of cinematography and things like that that actually do
Hmm.
become pretty impressive for the time, especially. And then um, some of the things they show, and really watching it today, going through more of it. seeing some of the films, there's a few things it does different than the more recent adaptation. Of course, adapting the like very significant piece of literature from 1928, and
Mhm.
so it was interesting to see the differences and to kind of appreciate those, um, and to appreciate some of the work it does with sound. Um, I mean, it's a really good film. It and to think about its place in history kind of takes it to another level when you try and put yourself there as best as you can, because this film would have had such a different impact in 1930. Like, so
Yeah.
close, like, that's so contemporary. It's weird now 100 years later, basically, looking back at it because we're so far removed, but that was like a lightning bolt for their time.
Yeah. I It's insane that this movie was made 12 years after the end of the First World War, and while sort of like all of the things were being put into place, or not put into place, but like falling into place in order for the Second World War to, fully take off in the way that it did, less than a decade later. It's insane to think that this movie is coming out like in the middle of those, and is dealing with such a contemporary issue, and is so like fervently anti-war. And we see that like even a movie like this that is so strongly anti-war, and people seeming to respond to it, it performed really well at the Oscars. I think it did like fairly okay at the box office. I think it did end up getting like um it ended up getting like banned in a few countries. I think it got banned in Germany like a few years later by the Nazis for obvious reasons. It was banned in France for a while. I think it might have been banned in some parts of the US. Um, but yeah, the fact that like this movie had such that like it played pretty well largely to large audiences, and was so strongly anti-war, and like obviously like wasn't enough to stop us from descending into another world war globally. Um, it's super
Well,
interesting, and it's like hard to think about it in the context of the time. Yeah.
and it is interesting because of you have to, like, think of it in 2 different ways with, like, its American impact and its global impact. You could argue with it being an American film, you might could argue that it did have a strong impact anti-war sentiment in America, considering how reluctant we were to join World War II, until we were, personally, hit with Pearl Harbor. So, maybe not to say that that was completely because of this film. Obviously, there were other things. Many Americans had seen war, um, in the actual theater of war instead of the theater of film. Um, Many young American men had experienced this personally, which is probably why
Mhm.
it was able to have such an impact. One thing I think is very interesting that this is an American film about a German soldier who's like not it's not people will get confused. It's not Nazi German soldier. This is World War One. So it's not like the epitome of villainy that the Nazis were
Yeah.
later, but still for a German soldier, a movie about a German soldier, still the bad guy in the war. Um just portraying him as a young kid, um trying to serve his country and then getting blindsided by the hell of war is, the fact that American audiences, like, responded to that and weren't just like, "Ha German soldier got what was coming to him." Um,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty powerful, and it kinda speaks to the universality of the film, where you're not really looking at it as, like, that much about a team sport thing. It's more of a individual hell, which goes back to the book and the movie. Like it's all from that source. Um, and I think it's interesting too because it's a I don't know if that how popular it was at that time. Maybe it was more popular than I know, but it's interesting that it's a historical fiction technically,
Mhm.
but it's like spiritually completely truth. But fiction in the sense that there's no actual guy named Paul Bomber or whatever that, died in the war, but it's,
Yeah.
like, spiritually the story of every single soldier that ever went over, um, into that war, so, um, yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, you spoke about how universal the story is, and I think the fact that they didn't need that the production and director Lewis Milestone didn't need to change the characters from being young German men to young American men, like speaks to how universal this story is and how universal the experience of war for the young men who and now young women who we end up sending into these like hellscapes, how awful that is and how universal that is. Like, it doesn't matter that it's Americans playing Germans. The individual people on the ground are experiencing these terrors in the same way. And it also like it although like the German state and the German like military was and is still seen, rightfully so, as the bad guys and like the main antagonists in World War One. The young men who made up the army are not that. They are not those villains. They are in many ways victim to the same system that all of the rest of the globe was, in terms of like the German state's desire to wage war on the rest of the world. Um, there's that beautiful scene when he's in the trench when Paul is in the trenches, and he has to like kill a French soldier, just because like that's what they have to do within the confines of war. And then he's stuck with him for hours, and he's like monologuing to this like dying French corpse. And they realize, like, he says at one point, he's like, if you weren't wearing that uniform, like, we would be brothers. Like, we're the same. Like, we're the same dude. Uh, this is affecting both of us the same way. And it's just like, it's really interesting thinking about this movie and, subsequent, war movies and like anti-war movies that have come out since. And I feel like this movie is able to be the like one of the strongest and most unflinching and like what's the word that I'm looking for? It like doesn't pull any punches in terms of like how anti-war it is. It is like fully
Uncompromising.
uncompromising. Thank you so much. It's very uncompromising in how anti-war it is. Um and the reasons for that, are what they are in the 80 years since. But I did find that point to be like super interesting in terms of uh yeah, just how uncompromisingly anti-war this movie is. So yeah, I don't know if you what else did you think about like Paul's experience, maybe like that scene with the Frenchman, and how universal this story like truly is.
I really think the only possible, and I'm not really sure that this was a takeaway at the time, the only possible thing that could chip at it in any direction is I could see maybe there were some Americans that may have watched this movie at the time thinking, "Oh, that poor young German sap being recruited into this, like, fruitless war by Germany," and, like, not necessarily equate that the same with American,
Mhm.
patriots and saying, like, "Well, America, we had a cause." Like, our young men were actually fighting for a cause, and this young man was fighting, an impossible war, because of his stupid, military leaders or whatever. So there could be some disconnect there, but I
Mhm.
think again, the reality of how people seem to react to it was more of a universal. We're sending our young men into these like just like slaughterhouses of war for really like nothing. And so I think um, the scene, was very interesting because again, my introduction to this story. Well, first of all, I heard about the novel, of course, like in school. I mean, we talked about
Mhm.
the novel itself in school, in literature, probably in history, but I had not read the novel. Still haven't read the novel. probably should, even though it's the same story. People say the novel may be even more powerful than any of the movies that have been made. Um,
Mhm.
and then so, but my entry into this was through the 2022 Edward Berger film. Um, and one thing I saw people criticizing that movie was the final scene with the butterfly, which was not in the 2022 movie. That was a really incredible scene in this 1930 film. But also today I was trying to understand, and I don't think that is actually in the novel. So, so my understanding is that the butterfly part is actually unique to the 1930 film, and it's a beautiful scene about just
Mhm.
this moment in the midst of the chaos of war, where Paul is basically broken at that point, um, and is just kind of like floating through and sees a butterfly, and it's just like one glimpse of beauty in this bleak world, and then he's just unceremoniously shot. Spoilers. You should watch this film. It's fine. Just so, but also the other part that got to me, and I'm not sure, I can't remember now. I really love the 2022 version, but I can't remember
Mhm.
now if it was changed where Paul doesn't take a furlough. In this movie, Paul does do the furlough where he goes home and comes back to the war. And I'm not sure that that happens in Edward Berger's film, which I think works. I think it works either way. But in
Mhm.
this film, I thought it was interesting because when he came back home and had to deal, there's the scene where he's dealing with the older men at the table who want to talk to him about the military strategy and what he's got to do to have his honor. And like at one point, they're all arguing about the best strategy and like pointing to the map, and he just kind of walks away. Um, and just like, and then also when he goes back to the classroom from the beginning, where his professor
Mhm.
was like rah rah recruiting the boys, like your greatest honor will be go and fight for your fatherland. He goes back and
Yeah.
it's another class of the same boys, new boys, young boys,
Mhm.
and he's like, "Oh yeah, I tell these boys all about it." And Paul's like, "What do you want me to say?" And at first he's like, "We go there, we try not to die, sometimes we do." And then like it's succinct, but then he even goes further because it's like the professor's just like making him so pissed off, and he just rails into like the futility of it all and like continues to attack, just like so anti-war. And one of the things I thought would be interesting to talk to you too about is there are people out there who try and say
Mhm.
no film is really anti-war. Have you seen that argument?
Mhm.
They're making a spectacle of war, so even if it's supposed to be an anti-war message, they're somehow they're somehow not anti-war. I totally don't agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's become a lot harder as like filmmaking technology has become more advanced and we're able to show war in ways that we haven't before. I think it like ultimately becomes spectacle and we're not fully able to capture just how like horrific it can be. I do think that there are a few examples of movies that have done that. Something like Come and See comes to mind. I think that where this movie succeeds is because it is like so dedicated to hammering you over the head in its anti-war message, that it like never really becomes a, we'll say like a pro-war movie, even though there are a lot of amazing action sequences that are like super epic and extremely impressive on like a technical front. I still don't think that like those scenes like fully capture like just how terrifying war is. There's that one moment where there's like a British or like French soldier who's like, running through like no man land, and he holds on to the barbed wire, and then like Paul throws a grenade, and then there's like a plume of smoke, and then the smoke clears and it's just the hands left. Like that's like the closest we get to like, oh, this shit is like actually super terrifying.
Yeah.
um but so I think I've mentioned it on the show before. My my dad is a veteran. He fought in Vietnam, and I think like anyone who has spoken to anyone who has like experienced war will like know that um everything that like they talk about in terms of like what they are able to talk about, because a lot of times like these people come home with like the worst PTSD and can't even like speak about the things that they saw. Whenever they are able to talk about it, it is like never good. Like no one comes home from war and is like, that was as sick as what they promised. Like Paul was never going to come home and like go to that classroom and be like, yo, teacher, when you gave us that pump up speech, like a couple years ago, war was exactly like that. It was so cool. Like it was so much fun killing random French dudes in the trenches and like sleeping next to my friend's shit because like we can't, go to the bathroom anywhere besides in this trench. And then it was also awesome and like gave my life a lot of meaning when I saw his brains get blown out in the trenches. Um so
Right.
like even though this movie is super heavy-handed, I think it kind of needs to be in order to like fully be an anti-war movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And on another note, and this ties in because I don't know what it was like at the time. Um, Obviously now, like if you're portraying the U.S. military in film, if you're portraying like if you're trying to use accurate stuff, the U.S. military is kind of all up involved in your film. Like we talked about.
Mhm,
We've seen with like Top Gun Maverick. Um,
mhm,
and this movie didn't, I guess, have to contend with that, even if that was the thing at the time. I mean, it was depicting German troops, and there wasn't anything really particularly. So, I don't know that they had to contend with that at all. But even Maverick is interesting to me, just as a aside. I think people were saying, well, that's like a rah rah American, like awesome America, let's go to war film. Which it's like it strikes a little more of a balance to me than that. There is at least in Maverick some of the same, like Tom Cruise Maverick in that movie is like we are like not we're sending these people to die. Like we're treating this mission like it's this big cool thing, but like you're just they're expendable. So it's like definitely not anti-war like this movie, but it does touch on this
mhm.
expendability. Really is what it is, expendability of young men in the war machine. I think this film didn't get into as much as the 2022 version, and I want to talk about the 2022 one just a lot because it's just easy to compare for the sake of this movie. Um,
Yeah.
it didn't quite try and touch on the greater strategy as much, except for that scene with the old men, which I think was more true to the original novel. Although I don't think looking at the overall strategy is necessarily wrong in the way that the Edward Berger movie did it. I think both of those movies communicated in different ways the futility of the action. But what did you think about the choices of how to keep the story focused on um, individual, like the people right there in Paul's company, and not get into the minutia of tactics?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see it either way, right? So looking at the 1930 version where it's just focused on Paul and like his troop and a lot of his like high school classmates, um, does help us focus in on what this movie and story is trying to tell us, which is that uh, we send these young men into these war zones, and it is like extremely cruel. It's an extremely cruel thing to do to these young people, to have them live through all of these experiences in the name of like some grander strategy or patriotism and service to one's fatherland, or whatever it may be. um in the Edward Berger version, I do see like why you want to include those scenes, because that having that like visual juxtaposition between the two like kind of just like makes the Paul story hit that much more. But I think it's easy for something like that to then fall into like it can't truly be an anti-war movie because it is in some way like glorifying what it is that happens in war, whether it be the strategy or like the spectacle of like what war looks like. I think that the 2022 version like does suffer from that a little bit, even though I think that its intention is to like fully stick to the like emotional core of being something that's anti-war in the same way that this like 1930 version is. There is that one scene where they're all like the soldiers are like sitting around and they're talking about like, why the hell are we here? Like, what are we doing? Like, what is this? And one of the guys is like, you know what we should do? We should like rope off a giant field and like all the presidents and kaisers and cabinet members and members of parliament and prime ministers, they should all like strip down to their boxers or whatever, and they should just like bash each other with clubs, and best country wins, and like that's it. And I think that's like a cheeky way of like just like having someone express through dialogue what you would otherwise be trying to communicate with like the showing of military strategy in other scenes. And again, I do credit this version of the movie for doing that and just like sticking to its guns and being like, we are going to over communicate the fact that this is like an anti-war story, as opposed to like leaving it up to interpretation for for audience members.
Yeah, and going back to some of the technical aspects of it, so I was because it's such an early film. So this was the first talkie, the jazz singer came out in 1927. And
Hmm.
this film is in 1930. So as far as I can tell, based on a couple different searches I did, this is the first feature length war film that was a talkie that had, synchronized sound and actual dialogue that was focused on war. So I can't imagine, this is the first time when people went to theaters, um, and could see, and apparently also this is an interesting factoid, um, that this film came out in a silent version as well as a
Oh, interesting.
sound version. Um, so it was actually produced that way so that films that did not yet have the capability for sound could still show it. So I'm really interested to see how that would have looked, because obviously there are scenes with long monologues,
Hmm.
that if you don't know what's being said, like trying to put all that dialogue on cards would be exhausting. um,
Yeah.
you know, um, but to have those, I mean, those anti-war messages in sound with visuals for the first time is kind of powerful on its own. I think, I mean, showing the professor that's recruiting in the beginning and then having Paul's confrontation later and being able to see a young man who's gone through, you've watched this person go through, and then there's the incredible sound, for the most part, the incredible sound of the war and the sights, and then you see this man go through
Mm.
hell, go back, and then confront his professor and being visibly angry and hearing the vocally angry. It's like the first time ever that someone could do that without being like a traveling stage play, I guess. So that would never have been able to capture the kind of war feel. So it's like this is the first time that experience was able to be delivered to this kind of degree at the time. So I thought that was interesting, and also talking about how it's not a German film because it wouldn't have been allowed to be made in Germany. Um, Apparently, um, I love so this film. One great thing that it has going for it, maybe worth half a star in itself, is that it pissed off Joseph
Hmm.
Goebbels so bad. Um, um, so this was interesting because it's just in Wikipedia, but
Hmm.
after its German premiere in Berlin, on December 4th, 1930, Nazi brown shirts under the command of Goebbels disrupted screenings by setting off stink bombs, throwing sneezing powder in the air, and releasing white mice in the theaters. Also, they unfortunately eventually escalated to attacking audience members perceived to be Jewish, um, and they repeatedly yelled out "Judenfilm" while doing these things. Um, and so, on one hand, obviously awful that they were doing that, but um, kind of course, we can't recommend this film, *Inglourious Bastards*, because it's in the canon, but kind of
Hmm.
fits in with that kind of idea of the power of cinema, um, to stand against forces like Nazi Germany, and how powerful media and messages can be, and how threatening they are to authoritarianism. Thought that was interesting.
It's super interesting. The last episode, the last movie that we spoke about was M, which came out in 1931, which is a German production. And we were talking in that episode about how I always add an R to it. I always say Goebbels, but how
It
uh,
might be Goebbels,
Goebbels.
honestly.
Yeah, I think it's like more how you're pronouncing like Goebbels, Goebbels. Um,
Goebbels.
when gerbils, yeah, Bozo doesn't even deserve a proper pronunciation of his name, to be completely honest. um but how he and Hitler saw M, and they wanted to recruit Fritz Lang, who directed M, to be part of their like propaganda machine. It, like, you know one thing that the Third Reich understood was like utilizing the power of cinema for their movement. And like that part of that meant seeing a movie like All Quiet on the Western Front that is very much so trying to communicate to people, and successfully communicating to people, I think, in a lot of ways, that like sending young men off to war is like not good for them or for us at large as societies, or as like a global society. And they saw that and they were threatened by it. I'm sure that the book was banned, and part of like all the book burnings that they were doing in Nazi Germany. A movie like this, there's no way that it could be shown, because its message is like it's so clear and it's so strong. Um the I wanted to circle back to the other point that you were making about this being like a really early sound film, and really like utilizing that technology to its benefit. I feel like a lot of times when we talk about like talkies versus silent film, um oftentimes we talk about how like synchronized sound and dialogue and stuff ends up being used as like a crutch to communicate things that would otherwise be communicated through cinematography and editing and things like that. But I do feel like in this movie it totally works, and like understanding that the technology was so new, and that the filmmakers were like, oh, we can just like have someone speak lines of dialogue that say what it is that we want to say, and basically like pull ideas directly from the text of the book, like when Paul goes back to the classroom, or when they're having that discussion underneath the tree about why they're there. Like, I don't know, for this movie it all kind of works for me. Did it work for you, or were you kind of like, was there ever a moment where you were hopeful that like sound would be utilized in a different kind of way?
No, for the most part, it all worked well for me, and I think when we talk too about silent films versus talkies, we're very focused on the dialogue talk aspect of it. But I'm guessing, if I'm not wrong, maybe I'm dumb, but it's not just talking; it's the sound itself, right? Because um, so with the synchronized sound, the sound is such an important part of the horror of the war, because a lot of times you're not really seeing much of anything. In fact, like I said, there was when I first watched this, it was a little late. I was a little tired, and I closed my eyes for a little bit, but I was hearing some of the war
Mhm.
stuff going on, and it was really the dropping of bombs in this movie. I think, in large part too, with that like whiny sound it's scary, and as you hear them and they're exploding and hitting the ground, it's very scary. And I know, at least in parts of this too, there's, I mean, there's a lot of times where it's the camera is focused on Paul's face and his horror and his fear
Mhm.
in the moment, and the only thing that you have to remind you of the visuals that you're not seeing right now are those noises. I mean, the score as well, obviously, the score plays a part, but the noise of war is a really integral part, and that was probably, again, pretty one of the earlier times that people really got to feel that all-encompassing noise of war. I will say that at times the sound effects were a little bit off. Like when Paul gets shot at the very end, the um the sniper shot I don't think has the best sound effect.
Mhm.
I mean, like we've seen, of course, modern movies, a movie that you didn't appreciate very much, Civil War, that had great
Yeah.
sound. The gunshots were very visceral and really like jumping almost in your seat at the sound of gunshots. Whereas the sniper shot at the end of this film has a little bit of a zingy, a little zing, and then
Yeah.
he's like dead. You know, it kind of lacks like quite that punch that if you really
Mhm.
had that moment where he's reaching out to the butterfly and you hear a high powered bang, that
Yeah.
is gonna be feel a little more real and a little more terrifying and shaken, but it still works, obviously, and overall, the sound effects in the movie are pretty strong, but, at times, you get
Yeah.
that dingy shot sound that doesn't really invoke the same level of fear.
Yeah. Absolutely, and obviously, this was like w- one of the first major war epics. So like we were far from mastering the technology in the ways that we have kind of mastered it now, and things like Civil War or uh, like Dunkirk comes to mind, another movie in the canon. But yeah, like that aspect of the synchronized sound not only being able to be utilized for dialogue, but also to like express the terrors of war when like bombs are being dropped. Like some of those sequences are super captivating and like still read as extremely epic even today. But and because it was so early, I don't think that they read epic in a way that like glorifies war. I think they were epic in a way that was just like, holy crap, that's pretty intense.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
staggering. Yeah, there's a large scope, um,
yeah,
kinda deal.
yeah, you can maybe not fully, but it gave audience members an idea of like what it was that people were living through in those trenches. Um, where yeah, again, I think it has become a lot harder as our filmmaking technology has become better, where when you're trying to show what that looks like, it reads as more glorified than anything else. Um, One thing that I wanted to mention before we wrapped up this discussion, I just wanted to quote um, one of our contributing writers, RJ, who wrote the Canon article for this movie. She mentioned at one point, I just thought this line was great. She said, "It's a movie about boys promise meeting and handed madness," which I feel like perfectly sums up what this movie is about, what this movie is trying to communicate about what it is that war does to us. The whole story is about how Paul starts off, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go to war for his country, and once he gets there, he's just handed absolute madness, absolute dog shit, and is quickly disillusioned as to what it is that he's doing there, why it is that he's there, seeing his friends die off one by one, and then in his final moment, trying to still find some beauty in this world, which we know does still exist in a world even where you're living through the worst hells of war, and still ultimately dying in that moment where he is finding that like that beauty and that peace. But I just thought that RJ like summed it up perfectly in terms of like what this movie is all about.
Yeah, it's a banger line. That's a very it's poignant. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Um, so obviously a great movie. We spoke about how it performed well at the Oscars and everything that this movie has kind of meant. But I feel like we've kind of touched on everything that there is, unless you had some more thoughts and items that you wanted to talk through with this flick.
Not really. I think we have touched on it. We didn't talk about performances because it's not really so much of a performance-based film, although obviously it's important that the folks that we're following give good performances, particularly Paul, who does a great job.
Hmm.
I don't have the actor's name in front
Yeah,
of me, but it's not really like a film where you're going, "That performance was great." You're thinking more about the story and of course, a lot of the visuals, the visual and audio horrors of everything. Um, it's just not a performance heavy film in that sense. But the actor that does play Paul does do a great job of bringing that home because he does have some monologues and things in there
yeah.
that are especially important
Lou
to
Ayres.
Lou Irish. Thank you.
This is Lou Ayres, yeah. Who uh he was in movies until like the mid 80s, which is pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Um yeah, I think he was like 22 or 24 at the time that this came out. So he was like, you know, w- sorry to cut you off, but like he either I don't know if he served in the First World War, but like definitely knew people who served in the First World War, was definitely personally affected by the First World War, which I think is super interesting about like this whole production because it did come out so close after the war that like a lot of people who were involved in the making of the film had direct ties to the war itself and were probably like coming at this story with like firsthand experience of what the subject matter of this movie is. But sorry, I cut you off in the middle
Oh,
of
and
your thought.
that's a
on
good
the
point, and
performance.
also just another thing from the Wikipedia. I'm not like an expert on this film. I just read a little bit about it, but apparently there was a lot of German veteran. There were people who served in the German military in and around LA that played bit parts and were technical supervisors on film. So there were people all around that were also involved, which is amazing. It's crazy. Um, so
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, solid performance from Lou Ayres. Also from Louis Wolhelm, who played Cat, who is like the older soldier, kind of like the leader of their little like troop and platoon. He's also great as sort of like the hardened vet of the crew, trying to lead these boys who, all unfortunately meet their deaths in this movie, as does the cat character. Um, yeah, man, it's I mean, as a movie about this stuff, about this like particular kind of subject, it's so sad to think about how it's still something that we have to deal with. Young people who are promised this glory and all of this meaning, and then their lives get cut short because the Kaiser has the biggest ego in the world. Um, you know, it's all it's all super fucked up, and it would be cool if more movies could, try to communicate what it is that this movie is trying to communicate. And I think that's why it's essential, is because
and
it stands out as a true version of an anti-war movie.
yeah, and absolutely, and obviously set the tone and the expectations for pretty much probably all war films that came after. Also wanted to just say too, I'm not a fan of war films really, not in particular. The Edward Berger film stood out and was like one of the first war films that I really was like, I actually love this film. I wanted to just do an addendum, even though we're not talking about the 2022 version. I do think there's a lot of talk about when it came out. The obviously, like we said in this version, Paul dies in the trenches after he comes back from furlough. His last friend is killed, and he sees a butterfly and is shot by a sniper, and that's the end. And then the final image, which we didn't talk about, which is an overlay of all the boys going off to war overlaid over the cemetery. Um,
Oh, brilliant.
with
Absolutely
with
brilliant
silence,
way to end the movie.
with silence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very effective, and probably more effective because of all the use of sound that came before it.
Yeah.
So it the use of sound actually made that silence deafening, so that's it really is brilliant ending. Um, in the book, Paul dies on a sunny day where nothing happens, so much so that the final line of the book is why it's called All Quiet on the Western Front, which is that no action had really been reported that day. So the idea was
Mm.
the report that came through all quiet, nothing notable happened today, even though he died. And then in the 2022 version, of course, we get a little bit something that was a little bit controversial because Paul is back on the front lines on November 11th, which was we're taping this on November 12th. Yesterday was Veterans Day, named after this very event. And the
Mhm.
just had been signed and was to expire at 11 a.m. And the troops are sent into battle for one last time, despite the leaders knowing the armistice is coming. It's like almost like a play to the whistle blows kind of deal. And right, even though Paul
Yeah.
is, even though Paul is technically he's acting heroically in a sense, I guess, if you can consider what they're doing heroic. He's acting and trying to, he's trudging out into battle, but we know, the audience knows. I'm not sure if he knows. I can't remember if he's been
No, I
told,
don't think
if the troops were
I
told,
don't think
but
any of them know. Yeah.
it's, in your heart it's all for naught, and to watch him die in this final push that is just pointless, completely useless, is also a very strong ending. So I think everything. Honestly, I haven't seen the middle version of this movie, but the two versions I have seen of this story have both been very affecting in their own ways.
Yeah. Yeah, the 70 something version. In the burger version, that ending really does like hammer home the point of like, these kids are dying really like for nothing, you know, even, you know, uh treaty signed or no treaty signed, they're dying for nothing, and it's because of decisions made by people in like behind in rooms behind closed doors who don't ever actually feel the effects of the decisions that they're making, and it ends up being these young kids um who end up bearing the brunt of those decisions made by these like powerful people, which ends up becoming super sad. In the 1930 version, it's sad because he's finding beauty in the world and dies because for one brief moment he wants to find some beauty in the hellscape that he's experiencing. And in the book version, it's terribly sad because uh it's seen as nothing happening, his death, even though we followed him for so long, his death becomes and is seen as something that is so insignificant, right? Because like uh over the course of this war, like we see all of his classmates die, and it's like they're rarely like the like big heroic dramatic theatrical kinds of deaths that we're used to in movies and stuff about war. It's just like, one minute they're there and then the next minute they're not. And that's like one of the really messed up unfortunate truths of war, that again this movie like hammers home um so beautifully and so strongly. And I
And I
think that's like the main reason why it's essential.
Yeah, and I want to. I'm really like just tacking this on, and it's not really like fair, but I'm going to do it anyway because the 2022 film. I'm not going to recommend
Mhm.
it because it's the same story. So I just want to just say
Yeah.
also props. Another scene that's not in this 1930 film that I think is so beautiful in that one is when we open the 2022 version of this, we've got this character that's almost treated very initially like the protagonist, Heinrich, who we just meet in the middle of chaos in the trenches, and we see him run out into the battlefield, and like ultimately like his gun runs out of ammo, and he just like stabs a dude, but then you cut to him just in a pile of dead bodies, and we follow his uniform as it gets washed of all its blood and like patched up and like shipped to the next person. And like that scene is like pretty much a distillation of the entire movie that you're about to watch.
Yeah.
So that's another beautiful scene that I just wanted to, even though it's not the right movie, it's a different movie. It's the same story.
Yeah.
Just wanted to give it some props.
It absolutely. Yeah, definitely check out the 2022 version. I do need to rewatch that. I think the first time I watched it, I was kind of wishy-washy on it, because I wasn't sure where it fell on the glorifying versus like being strongly enough anti-war. Um, you can probably tell by listening to this that I don't really believe in war. I you know we don't have to get all the way into my thoughts. I think that like the people who serve in war are doing insanely brave things. I just don't think that they should be forced or that they need to be doing it because of again decisions that are made behind closed doors by people who don't actually give a crap about them. Um, and if anyone wants more of my thoughts about it, hit my line. Um, we can, with that, I guess, jump into recommendations for All Quiet on the Western Front. Um, like you said, we won't be recommending the 2022 version or the novel because neither of us have read it, or the 1970 whatever version because neither of us have seen it. But we will be recommending at least one other movie. And two other things. Those two other things can be more movies. They can be books or TV shows or video games or albums, any and everything else. We just can't recommend any movies in the canon. And three and only three recommendations. So, Jacob, whenever you're ready, what is your first reco for All Quiet on the Western Front?
My first recommendation is kind of a dual recommendation, which is kind of maybe bending the rules, but I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense. Have you seen The Kingsman with Ray Fiennes, the prequel to the Kingsman series?
I haven't. Okay, I haven't seen it. And I have. There's is that the one that ends with the introduction of a Hitler character, and it does like the post credit scene of like Hitler will return, and then there's a frowny face at the end because that's like an inside joke between me and my friends in our movie group chat,
I don't know that it
which is like
does that,
I don't
although
know.
it might have
Okay,
a similar, there might be a joke based on that because there's an
okay,
assembly of like these Kingsmen. Anyway,
yeah.
the tone of that film, it's not for everybody. The tone is all over the place. We have some really ridiculous, fun spy stuff mixed in with some like war gravitas stuff. Um, but the reason it's a dual recommendation, and this recommendation will be special because I will be willing to basically provide the recommendation in the podcast. So, have you read or heard the poem "Dulce et Decorum Est" by Wilfred Owen?
I have not.
So there's a scene within the Kingsmen, and all of the Kingsmen has a lot of comedy and a lot of action and a lot of almost basically goofy spy stuff that has to do with the war. There's a scene that's very serious, where Ray Fiennes recites this poem, and it's not only is it about war and about men going and dying in war, specifically in All Quiet on the Western Front, the professor, that is one of the things that is told to the students is dulce est decorum est pro patria mori, which if you heard him say that and you didn't know what it meant, that means it is sweet and proper to die for one's country. That's what that phrase means in Latin. So since you have not read it, Raph, and since maybe our
Hmm.
audience has not read it, I would be willing to read it. It's a very short, it's not a long poem. My reading of
Please,
it
please
will
do. That's
my
awesome.
reading of it will not be as, like, awesome as hearing Ray Fiennes. Ray Fiennes does not recite the whole poem in the movie,
Eh, you Ray
but
Fiennes. What's
Ray Fiennes delivers the crap out of this poem, and then in context, it's even better. But I'm gonna read it. Part of it is like
I believe in you.
trying not to do. You know how people read it just sing songy, trying to hit.
Hmm.
So Wilfred Owen, just a little background on this poem, real quick, to make sure I do it justice because it does deserve a little bit of introduction, probably before I just read it to understand. Because for all we know, this poem could have been written in 1980. um, let's see, where's the so it's a poem written by Wilfred Owen during World War One and published
Okay.
posthumously in 1920. So this guy was a poet, an English poet, um, um, and he was one of the leading poets of World War One. So, with that being understood, here is Dulce et decorum est. Uh, Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched to sleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on blood-shod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams before my helpless sight he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin, if you could hear, at every jolt, the blood come gargling from the froth corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. Bang.
Nice. Well done.
A
Well
beautiful,
done.
a beautiful poem.
Yeah. Uh that is a great recommendation. That was a great reading of the poem. I'm excited to like revisit that because yeah, the the connection between between that and this movie are strong for sure. Uh that yeah, that's awesome.
It definitely captures
Thanks
the
for that.
soul of All Quiet, for sure.
Yeah. That was sweet. Um cool. So for my first recommendation, I am going to recommend a YouTube video essay. Because who doesn't love watching an hour long video breaking down overarching themes in different movies. This is from a YouTube page that I really enjoy. I think a lot of people do like and watch these videos. It's a video from like Stories of Old. You've probably seen at least some of his work before, but he has a really really good essay about anti-war movies called Lies of Heroism, which is basically about like breaking down the idea of like, are we able to fully make anti-war movies? I think All Quiet on the Western Front does come up. I think he talks a little bit more about the Edward Berger version than this Lewis Milestone 1930 version. But if you are interested in ideas about like anti-war movies, this is like the perfect video essay to start.
Awesome. Do a favor if you can, link it in the bio, so
Yeah,
it's easy to find.
absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. So, My next recommendation, I had to double check to make sure it's not in the Saw canon. I don't think it is. Uh, and maybe it's coming, but I don't know that, so I'm going to go ahead with it. It's a movie that I haven't seen in full, but I've seen a good bit of it, and I've seen the most important part of it. And that is The Great Dictator, um, with Charlie
Nice.
Chaplin. Speaking of movies that are first talkies, the first talkie for Charlie Chaplin, and who knew the little tramp had an amazing monologue in him, which is really confusing if you try to share it on social media to people who don't know because he looks like Hitler, um, which the context of the film would make sense, but he's saying very not Hitler things. And it's a message that is so I think that's from 1935. It's a message that very much
Hmm.
still resonates today, um, against authoritarianism, Nazism, and just um, an incredible this incredible time between the two world wars, where talkies had just started, and um, obviously no one really iconic, well known, and quite on the Western Front, but Charlie Chaplin, probably one of the most iconic movie stars of that era, coming out with a really strong monologue that could never have been delivered in silent film, with that
Yeah.
power. And so, yeah, Charlie Chaplin using his voice to denounce war, basically. Yeah,
Awesome. That's an amazing recommendation. It may have recently been voted into the canon, but that's okay. We'll take it either way. I haven't seen it, but it seems like, from my understanding, uh, using the new talkie technology for a very specific purpose of like, yeah,
have you
let's utilize this for a great monologue,
have you seen the monologue?
because we can do it now. I haven't even seen the monologue because I want to watch it in the context of the movie.
That makes sense.
Um,
Well, it's such a great monologue. It's worth it either way, but it does help to have the
yeah,
context to understand why he's looking like Hitler.
yeah, I will, I will definitely, I will certainly check that out. Um, I'm gonna break the rules a little bit here as well, and I'm gonna do a two for one. I'm gonna recommend two books that are also about the experience of war and how awful it is for the young men who are the ones who go off and experience it. Uh, Two different wars. One is about Vietnam. One is about World War II. I am recommending The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which is maybe my favorite book about the Vietnam War, and Flags of Our Fathers. I'm forgetting who that one is by. I think it's by the son of one of the guys who held up the flag at Iwo Jima, but both books about the toll that fighting in war took on the young people who are again the ones who are sent off to do this fighting. Really, really good books to get a good understanding of what it's like to be in a war zone.
That's awesome. I'll have to make sure to send me the titles in Slack so I can look those up. Be easier than
Absolutely,
trying to find it.
yeah.
Um, so my last recommendation. So I'm gonna have two again because one is a short film. One is a short film, and one is silly.
We're
And
cheating left and right.
I don't feel right. Like I feel I want to do this a little bit silly, but this film is also very serious, and I want to kind of honor that. So the silly one is like so the hard thing about finding recommendations for this movie is when it comes to other movies, it's like I either haven't seen things that would be great pairings or like all the great war films, anti-war films like are in canon or just so popular
Hmm.
it's like kind of not worth a recommendation. So I was like, what strange tangent can I go on? And this director's name is Lewis Milestone. So I was like, let's look at a film that has a milestone this year. And I was like, what film is celebrating 25 years this year? And there's many, many films celebrating 25 years. And I was like, well, which one has the most in common with All Quiet on the Western Front? And there was a film released 25 years ago that is about the futility of death, and that is Final Destination. Uh, that's another horror film. Not the horror of war, but the horror
Yeah.
of dying. Um, much more creative ways than the war, World War One, but still not necessarily any more brutal. So that's the sort of silly recommendation. But I did come up with one just now that I would maybe just
Yeah.
slot in as a more serious one. It was making the rounds on social media not too long ago. A short film called "Don't Be a Sucker," um, an anti-fascist film produced in 1945 by the United States Army Signal Corps. Just a nice little look back almost 100 years ago at a little conversation between someone in the streets peddling authoritarianism, some kind of fascist concepts, and an older guy from Poland, I think, and an American guy who had
Hmm.
not lived through that, and the older guy from Poland being like, "This may sound good to you now, but let me tell you a little bit about my experience and how they do these things." I think it's worth a
Yeah.
watch. It's nice seeing things like that from older times.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like that. That seems like a cool little worthwhile watch.
It's on
And
YouTube,
obviously,
actually.
Final Destination. Yeah, a very very among the most thoughtful recommendations that we've had. I was waiting for you to somehow tie it back to Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, but we're not getting that this episode. Um, I still need to recommend a movie. I'm not going to recommend another anti-war movie because all the anti-war movies that I would recommend are probably mentioned in the video essay that I mentioned before. So instead, I am going to recommend a movie that's kind of tied to your first recommendation. Features the great Ray Fiennes. Obviously, we spoke a lot about Edward Berger's version of All Quiet on the Western Front. I don't think I've recommended it before, but it's never a bad time to recommend that people watch Conclave because that movie kicks ass. So, um, if you like what Edward Berger does in adapting All Quiet on the Western Front, check out Conclave because it's probably his best movie. Um, not really tied in any way thematically to this movie, the OG All Quiet on the Western Front, but still something that is worthwhile watching. So those are our recommendations. Jacob Holmes, thank you again for joining. Always a pleasure. Always great having you on. We check out Pole Position. He's coming fast and furious with those. A lot of Oscar prognosticating over there. Um, we'll be back in a couple days probably with another episode of the Canon. We're going to be talking The Thin Man with Brian Loomis. Excited for that one. Should be a great conversation. We will, you know, be in the same feed where you're catching us now on the Screen Age Wasteland YouTube page, uh, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. Also on the website proper, screenagewasteland.com, where you can find Pole Position and a bunch of other great articles and reviews and editorials and stuff from all of your favorite Saw contributors. You can also find all episodes of the Canon there. Um, we will be back next week with another very essential movie. And as always, in the meantime, folks, we will see you guys in the wasteland.